We are now seeing some of the first observances of Juneteenth now that it's a national holiday. Federal offices closed, many cities holding events to begin the marking of this first time that the national government is actually commemorating that end of slavery. It's remarkable because we are a nation that grapples with so many problems in our race, in our history, and our ability to face facts about the legacy of this country, how it was built. It was actually just 6 years ago that South Carolina took down its Confederate flag from the state capitol, which anticipated so many debates we live through now.
A historic day in South Carolina as Governor Nikki Haley signs a bill to remove the Confederate battle flag from State House grounds.
Historic day in South Carolina. The Confederate flag is down, but the fight's not over.
For all of us who have grown up in the shadow of this Confederate battle flag here in Columbia, it will be an emotional day. After more than 50 years, the flag will be taken down in a short and solemn ceremony.
Joining me now is the man you saw there, Craig Melvin, Today Show colleague. He was reporting there for the Today Show. He's also, of course, on MSNBC, the host of Greg Melvin Reports at 11. He has a new book out, and I recommend you get it. We're going to talk about it in a minute. Pops, Learning to be a Son and a Father. It's out in time for Father's Day. We're going to get into that. Thanks for being here, sir.
Thanks for having me, my friend. Good to see you, Mr. Melber.
Great to see you. We looked at that footage and thought about, wow, does it feel like longer than 6 years ago or less? Your thoughts on something you know so well from your home state and Juneteenth now?
You know, it feels like, to me at least, it feels like eons ago, even though it was just 6 years ago. But I'll never forget being there at the Capitol that day because my godsons were off to the side. Some of my other family, all of my folks are there in South Carolina. And some of my other family had come down to the State House to visit with me, but to also witness history. It is very difficult to overstate how much of a symbol that flag was to folks who grew up in Columbia. I grew up just 15 minutes from where that Confederate battle flag. And again, it's important to make the distinction. That was the Confederate battle flag that was raised above the State House, not in the wake of the Civil War, but in the 1960s, when a majority of the Confederate monuments were erected around this country. So to be there and to be able to have that front row seat to history 6 years ago. In fact, I hadn't seen that footage before. So kudos to your team for digging that up.
The team dug it up. That's not all the team dug up, Craig, because before we turn to the book, we do have a little housekeeping here. I hope you're ready.
What?
You know, one of the things as someone who was an attorney who came into the news, I had to learn from people. And I've learned a lot just watching you and then sometimes being around you. And our team noticed, and we got some footage for you to look at, that it seems like a little bit of one-way admiration, like I'm learning from you and loving you, and then you do your thing, which I respect. You got to keep it real on air. Let's roll the tape of some times that we've spent together. It's something that's often called the Jay-Z test, who famously said, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman.
Only Ari Melber can work in Hova into a segment on this. I knew Ari Melber when no one watched it.
You almost wonder if it's leading to an awkward silence.
I'm amazed that millions of people watch this show.
Teach us about roasting in the newsroom.
Millions still watch, Ari Melber. So clearly you got the last laugh. I was wrong 5 years ago.
You're never wrong. That's what we learn. And you do it with aplomb. So we enjoyed that. That's our reel. Let's get into this book, which I do recommend, and it's a great time for it. I want to read just a quote for you to expound on. You say, Pops gave you the advice, don't work too much. Don't miss out. He had a hard time letting go of his guilt over all that he missed out of as a dad. Dozens of times we've told him, hey, we forgive you. The problem is he hasn't been able to forgive himself. Craig, sometimes these truths are relatable because you read that, and a lot of people could, I think, in their own ways relate to that. Tell us about that, the story, this book.
part of the reason I wrote this book, or it was to celebrate fatherhood, to celebrate my dad, to give him his roses while he was still alive. But I wrote it in part so that he understood that we forgive him. He was absent. He was physically present, but he wasn't always there emotionally, certainly not spiritually. But it was because he struggled mightily with an addiction for nearly my entire life and most of his life. He was addicted to alcohol. He was addicted to gambling. And then at the age of 67, he decided to pick himself up and dust himself off and start life anew. He checked into an in-house rehab facility, a residential rehab facility for about 6 or 8 weeks. And he came out a new man. And we've been talking over the years, and he and I both decided that sharing his story would do a lot of good. And the book came out on Tuesday, and I got to tell you, man, I have been overwhelmed by the number of people who have reached out, who have identified with parts of his story, whether it was the addiction, whether it was the resiliency, whether it was this idea that our family had given up on him to a certain extent. And then all of a sudden, 3 years ago, we decided that we're going to try to get him some help. And we enlisted a professional, and he's a different grandfather. He's got 6 grandkids now, and the grandkids get a side of my dad that we didn't get. And we're so very grateful for it.
Does it mean something to you to bring it into the light? I mean, that's what you do as a journalist, but here it's a different when it's your own story. And so many problems we face interpersonally in America and around the world they're not on the news every night, but you have, whether it's addiction or mental health or other issues, and they get stigmatized when what they need to get is dealt with.
Yeah, and that's one of the chief reasons I wrote it. I mean, you know me, I'm not a public person. I have a public job, but I don't like to go talking a lot about my life, my family. I tend to think as a society in general, we overshare. But I really thought long and hard about this project. And after conversations with my younger brother and my dad and my mom, we thought there was power in my father's story. Because come to find out, my father's story is the story of millions of people in this country, people who are struggling with myriad addictions, their loved ones who don't really know what to do in a lot of instances. And so it was kind of a no-brainer. I will tell you, it was the most cathartic thing I've ever done. It was cheaper than therapy during the pandemic. Putting pen to paper, and for my father as well. It was as if my father had been waiting 67 years for someone to ask him some of these questions.
Wow. I love it when you put it like that.